If you use movies to escape reality like us, then you should be thankful to CGI because without the use of this technology, it would have been impossible to bring life to the screen. So today, we'll show you how a movie will look without the CGI. The movie we'll be talking about today is Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which I assume most of us have watched. Before diving in further, let's just talk about the movie first. Firstly, let's go over some Shang-Chi background. Marvel Studios' Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings and experienced it only in theaters in September 3rd. It's produced by Marvel Studios and distributed by Walt Disney Studio Motion Pictures, and is the 25th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Needless to say, even though some fans were getting tired of Marvel just expanding and expanding on their universe, Shang-Chi impressed fans and critics alike. The cast of this masterpiece includes Simu Liu as Shang-Chi alongside Awkwafina, Meng'er Zhang, Fala Chen, Florian Montagu, Benedict Wong, Michelle Yeoh, Ben Kingsley, and Tony Leung. And the movie is directed by Destin Daniel Cretton from a script he co-authored with Dave Callahan and Andrew Latham. The film has grossed $431.6 million worldwide, making it the sixth highest grossing picture of 2021, and Simu Liu's hero was introduced to the world in the film. He made a good impression. The movie did well at the box office, but its CGI, computer-generated imagery, was not up to the mark. Today we'll not talk about how bad the graphics were, but how the movie would have looked without CGI. Trust me, the video is gonna shock you. Let's get it on. Remember that fight scene in which Shang-Chi kills the dragon? Yeah, that scene, which gave goosebumps to all of us, is the scene which is also known as the end battle. If you aim at nothing, you hit nothing, character says in that scene. It's considered as Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings' most critical scenes. The struggle between father and son takes place on the Mountain of Souls against the Dragon Scale Gate, a massive red gate that contains the Dweller in Darkness and other demons. The majority of the fight was filmed on blue screen stages with Weta's virtual environment around them, as well as atmospheric and a plethora of ring effects. Weta created the CG world for father-son combat, but the filmmakers created a partially fragmented set for that environment as well. Filmmakers finally blue screened the set, preferring the digital world, but not before a significant amount of shooting had taken place, leaving Weta to roto out the actors throughout the sequence and totally replace the plating environment with the CG one. Marvel's experiment with diverse representation can be summed up in this way. After more than a decade of introducing Marvel Comics main characters, the studio's top brass appears to be finally taking representation seriously. If it was not CGI, the real dragon was just a giant blue head of a dummy dragon. Now, let's talk about the famous bus sequence. How is this possible when talking about Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings? We do not talk about the bus sequence. I mean, how often do you see a bus down on San Francisco hills getting crashed into real cars? The bus fight sequence is undoubtedly one of the film's most memorable set pieces, and it's also one of my favorite scenes from the movie. Shots of the fight outside the bus were based on full CG builds of sections of the city, which were done on LiDAR and texture photography taken on location. As per the makers of the movie, it was a difficult sequence to shoot, made considerably more difficult by the fact that it took place in such a small space. Swinging about on a gimbal, but thanks to computerized graphics, which made it possible for the makers to bring imagination into reality. So let's move on to how the scene would have looked if there was no CG graphics used. Well, if there were no CG graphics, the scene would not have been so epic. Although there was an actual bus in this scene, but it was that particular scene, the back half of the screen was replaced by computerized graphics. In the crash scene, some buses were complete work of CGs, but most of the sequence was a beautiful and exceptionally done mixture of reality and graphics. How can you forget Wenwu's compound? One of the challenges faced by the team working on the visual effects for Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings was the design of the Ten Rings compound, which was set in an isolated mountainous area. This was made much more difficult when the COVID-19 epidemic forced the cancellation of a live-action reference shoot planned for New Zealand. To overcome these challenges, the help of computerized graphics was taken. A revealing scene of Wenwu's original Szechuan-style compound appears early in the film. The team developed a totally CG rendition of that house built into the side of the mountain, as well as the road leading up to it, using a practical build-up to the first level. Would you believe that the full scene was done digitally? The helicopter landing was also a blended mixture of CG in reality. So, coming towards what you guys have been waiting for, what if the graphics were not used in that scene? Well then, practically you would not have seen any helicopters flying in that scene because the scene did not feature any real helicopters. They were solely utilized as props to allow characters to enter and exit. It was a live-action helicopter in a parking lot with a front row of guards. CG soldiers were used to add multiple rows of its guards. Interesting, isn't it? Next up is a garage escape sequence. The garage location was found in Sydney. The crew ended up matching the genuine photographs to our computer-generated versions, then blending it over a strip of blue screen that they did shoot with. They possessed a practical BMW as well as motorcycles. In the scene, stunt drivers were used where it was safe, but actors on a blue screen setup were used for interactions where it was safer. So there's a CG takeover on the shots anytime they have to do any of the bike stunts. If there was no CG involved in the scene, we'd not have been able to watch any bike stunt. Yes, you heard me right. Now let's get into the Shang-Chi bamboo scaffolding fight sequence. Production filmed the actors and stunt performers on a blue screen set piece in Sydney, complete with reflective windows and scaffolding sections, to create the intense Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings bamboo scaffolding fight that sees the characters Shang-Chi and Katie pursued off the side of a Macau building. This required the performers to be extracted from the plates, as well as the addition of a vast active Macau atmosphere to both the backdrops and the reflection background, the building windows. They constructed a 3-story high part of the building on hinges that could rotate roughly 45 degrees. It was a mirror with bamboo scaffolding and a few planks built up on it. So what that intense scene would have felt if there were not CGI? The scene was shot in a blue box with a mirror set in the middle. Are you surprised? Because I am. The mirror was used to get reflection of all the actors involved in the scene. The team planned to shoot the scene in a traditional way. However, once COVID was activated, everything became shut down and no more travel was possible. As a result, they went with a full CGI Macau. Now we have Wong versus Abomination fight scene. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings shows an extraordinarily lopsided Wong versus Abomination fight, much to the astonishment of many. While both characters were confirmed to reappear in future Phase 4 titles, Shang-Chi's was not intended to feature them. Shang-Chi secures a spot in his sister's cage bout as a result of his public fight with Razor Fist. One extremist-powered fighter and a Black Widow are among the participants. The comic book exact Abomination and Wong are without a doubt the most shocking combatants. The animators keyframed what audiences saw on the screen and shot all kinds of interior references, as the violence of Abomination's motions couldn't be accurately duplicated on set. If CGI were not in use, the scene would have been impossible to shoot. And in the video on the most interesting fact, if there was no CGI, the 10 rings on the wrist of the main character of the movie would have been only blue rings. And that's all for this video. See you in the next one. Ciao.